Hi, it's Sophie and welcome back to Sophie's Books, or welcome if you're new here. In today's video, I'm going to be giving you some feminist dystopian book recommendations to fill the void now that the Handmaid's Tale TV series is over. Don't worry if you haven't seen the TV series or you haven't read The Handmaid's Tale, this video is still for you and I'm hoping to give you some great recommendations even if you're just getting started in feminist dystopian fiction. After 8 years of production and 6 series, The Handmaid's Tale is finally over. And whilst I'm sad about it, I feel that they did everything they could with the story and there wasn't much else that they could do. Unfortunately, the ending, I'm not going to spoil it for you, don't worry, didn't really give the resolution that I'd hoped for and I think a lot of people had hoped for, but it was kind of clear from when they announced the Testaments TV series, which is the sequel to The Handmaid's Tale, that the resolution wasn't going to happen. But what I do love about that final scene is how they link it back to the original book. And I think that made the ending a great ending. So the first book I'm going to talk about in this video is obviously The Handmaid's Tale, written by the queen of speculative fiction, Margaret Atwood. So this was first published in 1985, but I feel that over the last few years it has become even more relevant than when it was first published, based on everything that's happening in America in regards to women's reproductive rights. So The Handmaid's Tale is set in a not too distant future in America, in New England, where a totalitarian theocracy called the Republic of Gilead has taken over and USA no longer exists. It is ruled by this regime. So in this regime, any fertile woman is enslaved and forced to become a handmaid, which means that their sole responsibility is to bear children for the commanders and their wives. The novel follows Offred, who has been placed in the house of a high commander and his wife, and we explore the world through her eyes. Margaret Atwood herself said that she didn't include anything in this novel that hadn't already happened somewhere in the world in history. So that makes this feel especially chilling and you feel like this is entirely plausible. Atwood's writing is brilliant and it is very vivid and at times poetic. She just has this amazing way with words and just writes so well. The story is told through 3 timelines, so the present timeline, then we also get some flashbacks into Offred's life when she was younger, and then also we get some flashbacks into the start of the Republic of Gilead taking over. Now, what is quite strange about this novel is that we never learn Offred's name. So in Gilead, the handmaids are given the title of and then the name of the commander whose household they're living in. So Offred is living in Fred Waterford's house, so she is named Offred. So I would probably recommend that you read any of the trigger warnings before going into this, as there are a lot. I feel that this is such an important novel, so yeah, definitely read this. So there's also a graphic novel of The Handmaid's Tale, which has art and is adapted by Leni Zumas. This is a great one to pick up if you want to know what happens in The Handmaid's Tale, but you don't really feel like picking up the novel or you don't think you're going to gel with the writing style, then this really is for you because it tells the same story and just in kind of bite-sized chunks as you would expect from a graphic novel. And we also get some beautiful artwork here, very vivid. So I think this is a great place to start. Or if you have read the novel and want to experience it again in a different way, then yeah, definitely pick this up. Okay, so the next book is the sequel to The Handmaid's Tale. So this is The Testaments. This was published in 2019 and it was winner of the Booker Prize jointly with Bernardine Evaristo's Girl, Woman, Other. So that just tells you how well this was received. And I think Margaret Atwood has done an amazing job of coming back to this world such a long time after she finished The Handmaid's Tale and giving us a great sequel. So The Testaments is set 15 years after the events in The Handmaid's Tale, and it is told through 3 points of view. So we have Aunt Lydia, who is one of the aunts, and in The Handmaid's Tale, the aunts are responsible for the handmaids and they make sure that they have all the training they need to become a handmaid, and also they pick the postings for the handmaids. We also have the perspective of a daughter of Gilead and a girl who lives in Canada. I was fascinated to see that Atwood had included Aunt Lydia as a perspective, as she is generally very much involved in Gilead and she is responsible somewhat for the handmaids having to be placed in these postings. So she is a hand of Gilead, and I thought that was a really interesting perspective to choose, and we get more of an insight into Aunt Lydia and her thoughts and feelings towards the Republic of Gilead. This also gives you a bit of insight into how Gilead is potentially starting to crumble. This is again brilliantly written, and it's great to see what happened to Offred after The Handmaid's Tale, because that's something that we've never known. Also, this is being turned into a TV series, so I can't wait to see how they're going to adapt that and what that's going to add to The Handmaid's Tale TV series. So now I'm going to move on from The Handmaid's Tale, and my next recommendation is I Who Have Never Known Men, and this is by Jacqueline Harpman. This was originally published in French in 1995 and then was translated into English in 1997. It kind of fell into obscurity. It went out of print in the English version. It seemed to go by largely unnoticed until a few years ago when it started to become quite popular, and it started to pop up on TikTok quite a lot and in the book community, and then has built a larger following now, which is totally deserved. This is an amazing book. I Who Have Never Known Men tells the story of 39 women and one young girl who are held captive in a cage underground. They are guarded by men, but the men never talk to the women. It's also not clear how the women ended up in the cage and how a young girl came to be among them. So the young girl has no recollections of the world. She knows nothing about the world or the time before she was captured. So that is quite an intriguing approach to telling this story. So this is one of those novels that I regularly think about. So when I read it in one sitting. I didn't want to put it down. I had to know what happened. I had to know more about the world and why these women had ended up in these cages. So we follow the perspective of the young girl who has no knowledge of the outside, and also her only encounters with men are with those men that guard the cages. So she doesn't really understand about societal norms, and to her, this is her life and this is the only life she has known. So she knows nothing beyond this cage and beyond these women. One day a siren sounds, resulting in all of the guards leaving the women to fend for themselves, still locked in the cage. So it's up to the young girl. She is their only hope of finding a way out of the cage into the unknown world above them. This is beautifully written, and I love seeing the perspective of this young girl who knows nothing about the world that she lives in. So we are kind of also experiencing this world through her eyes as well. But I would really recommend this. This is one of the best novels that I have ever read, and it's only under 200 pages, but there's so much in it, and it's just, I feel it's such an important read as well. So please pick this one up. So the next two recommendations are by the author Sophie Mackintosh, and the first one is The Water Cure, which, like I Who Have Never Known Men, has really stayed with me. It is one of those novels that I regularly think about, and I had such a great time reading this. I started this on a commute to work one day. I found that by the time I'd arrived at the station, I had read over half, and then I had to wait to the end of the day on the return commute until I could finish it. So it is just one of those books that you can't put down. So The Water Cure tells the story of three sisters who are living on an isolated island with their mother and father. They have been constantly drilled to believe that the mainland is toxic and particularly dangerous for women, so that they should stay on the island for their own safety and they're not allowed to leave. Their father, who is pretty much in control of everything in their lives, one day he mysteriously vanishes. Then soon after, two men and a boy are washed ashore onto the island, and we see how this impacts their life. This follows the themes of female identity, toxic masculinity, and trauma and survival. This is fast-paced and suspenseful, with Mackintosh slowly revealing details about the world and the lives of these three sisters. And this is also one of my favourite novels. The other book by Sophie Mackintosh is Blue Ticket, and this is set in a society that have a lottery system, and once women hit puberty, they have to pick a ticket out of the lottery, and it's either blue ticket or a white ticket. The blue ticket means that they're designated as unable to have children, whereas the white ticket means that they can have children. So we follow Calla, who is a young woman, and she draws a blue ticket from the lottery. So she is sent off with some supplies to move to a distant city and to live out her days without having children. And she soon starts to question her fate and tries to challenge the system. This again explores the themes of female identity, motherhood, and free will. And this is just as compelling as The Water Cure. Sophie Mackintosh is great at building suspense and keeping the reader hooked, so I would thoroughly recommend this one too. So next up we have a book by another amazing speculative fiction writer, and this is Octavia E. Butler. Now, she was an American sci-fi novelist. She wrote a lot about the themes of environment, class and race, and Parable of the Sower is the start of a duology. So I've only read this, I haven't read the second book in the duology, but I really need to pick that up soon. So Parable of the Sower is set in America, and violence rules and only the rich are safe. The rich live in these closed communities. So we're following the story of Lauren, who is a young woman, and she comes to realise that she has specific powers, and those powers are that she can feel other people's pain. And we find her documenting her life in this society in her journal. One night something tragic happens and it alters everything that she knows about society and everything that she believes. And she discovers that she must make her voice heard and that she can potentially have an impact on humanity. So Octavia Butler was an amazing author. The plot is compelling and the writing is beautiful, and I would highly recommend this. Octavia Butler also wrote Kindred, which I've heard a lot about, and I also want to pick that up soon, as well as the sequel to this one. My next recommendation is The Farm by Joanne Ramos, and this is about a businesswoman who sets up a luxury retreat for women, and they have access to organic meals, they have a personal trainer, daily massages, and also they get given a lot of money. But there is a catch. They have to dedicate themselves to producing the perfect baby for somebody else. We follow Jane, who is a young immigrant, and she is looking for a better life for her and her daughter and also her aunt. So she sees this as a great opportunity to make some money and provide a better life. But she soon comes to realise what the cost of doing this is. This explores the themes of race, class, power and inequality, and I would highly recommend it. It's a great read. So next up we have Red Clocks by Leni Zumas. This book follows the perspectives of 4 different women, and we are in an America where IVF is now illegal along with abortion and other reproductive rights. So we're following Ro, who is a school teacher, and she is desperate to have a baby, but because of all the illegalities around IVF, this is going to be impossible for her. There's also her best friend Susan, who is in a failing marriage with 2 children, and Ro's best student Mattie finds herself unwittingly pregnant. And then we also follow Jin, who is a herbalist, and she is giving women natural remedies, and she has now found herself the centre of a witch hunt. So I feel that this one is really important if you think about over the last few years what's happened in America with women's reproductive rights. This book feels more relevant now than ever. So I would definitely recommend this. This is brilliantly written and engaging, and I love how the author has interwoven the lives of these 4 women together, along with another woman who is a polar expeditionist from the 19th century. Her story is woven in the narrative as well. So next up we have The Growing Season by Helen Sedgwick. Now this is a little different from some of the other novels that I've mentioned, as it is more of a utopia. In this novel there is a biotech company called Full Life who have invented a reproductive pouch, so anybody can now carry a child in this pouch. So there's no need for women to give birth naturally. It can all now be done via a pouch. So we follow Eva, who she was born via a pouch, but she's very skeptical about Full Life and the technology that they're using, and she has spent much of her career campaigning against Full Life. So I found this one very intriguing, and it's interesting to consider with technology what could happen if women are no longer the only ones that can carry children. I feel it discusses technology and how far we should actually push technology. But Helen Sedgwick is a great writer, and the story is about family loss and what the future could potentially hold for us. So next we have The End of Men by Christina Sweeney-Baird, and this is set in Glasgow in 2025, and we follow Amanda, who is a doctor in a hospital, and one day a young man comes into hospital with a fever, and they discover that he has a virus. Within a few hours he dies, and then more and more people start to be infected with the virus, but they soon realise that it's only men that are being affected by this virus. So all of the men in the world are starting to die out, and we're facing the prospect of only having women left. And then it's also up to the women to try and find a cure for this disease. This was brilliantly written and very well paced, so I would highly recommend this. So the next book I want to recommend is The Power by Naomi Alderman. Now this is slightly different to some of the other novels that I've mentioned in this video, as we're kind of turning the head on female and male power. So the balance is now shifted completely the other way, where now women are finding out all over the world that they have powers to send electric shocks through their fingers, and this power can hurt people and also in cases kill people. So it's really about women now discovering that they're the ones with the power, and suddenly now that balance has shifted and men are losing control. It's quite an interesting take on the feminist dystopia genre. On the back it says, "The day of the girls has arrived, but when will it end?" So you can kind of get the idea that whilst now the power has shifted, maybe it's gone too far in the other direction. It's also described as The Hunger Games meets The Handmaid's Tale, which, yeah, sounds amazing. But Naomi Alderman is a great author. This was very well written, very compelling and engaging. This was also turned into a TV series, which I haven't watched yet, so I really need to catch up on that because I really enjoyed this book. The next book is the last recommendation for this video, and the book is The Bees by Laline Paull. This has to be one of the most bizarre and strangest books I have ever read in my life, but Laline Paull has done an amazing job here. So the story follows Flora, who is a worker bee in a beehive, and she is very low down in the hierarchy, and she is kind of looked at with disgust, but she gradually moves up the ranks and gets closer to the queen bee, and her job is to sacrifice everything for the queen. In this book there's also bees who are the fertility police, and their job is to destroy eggs from any bees that are not the queen, as the queen is the only bee who's allowed to lay eggs. So they destroy the eggs and also the bees who produce these eggs. But one day Flora breaks the most sacred rule of all. I just can't believe how Laline Paull wrote this book. She did so much research into the beehive and the workings of the hive, and you can just see it's honestly amazing that she managed to write from the perspective of a bee. I was also lucky enough to meet Laline Paull at the Women's Prize for Fiction a few years ago, where she was shortlisted for her other novel, which is Pod, and that's told from the perspective of a pod of dolphins. So again, she did amazing research on dolphins and how they interact. So yeah, this will be one of the strangest books you read, but I highly recommend it. It has really stayed with me for a long time. It's one I constantly think about. Also, I don't see a lot of people talking about this novel on BookTube, so I would encourage you to pick it up. Okay, so that is the end of the video. Those are all of my feminist dystopian recommendations. I hope you have enjoyed them and found some new books that you can put on your TBR. If you have any feminist dystopian recommendations that you think I will enjoy, then please do drop them in the comments, as I love the genre and I want to read as much as possible. Please like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to my channel for more of my content. Thank you for watching and see you again in the next video. Bye!